All right, so I've talked about how students aren't starting companies because they don't have ideas, because they don't think they're qualified yet, but a lot of times they also don't think that they have time. And so I want to talk about that in this video, do a really quick dive into what people think about this and what they should actually think and why what they think is generally wrong or invalid. So if you can't tell, there's kind of this theme of trying to bring up all the barriers that are in the way of people building stuff and trying to squash all of them. And so that's what we're going to do with this one. So if you don't know me, I'm Nathan Bucci. I run Catalyst XL. We have a 4-week program where we help university students join startups or start their own. Everything that I teach here and at Catalyst are the things that I've learned working with 9 VC firms and over 30 startups, helping hundreds of students get internships with startups, with VCs, bring their own companies from 0 to 1, and everything I've learned bringing my own company from 0 to 1. So just to get right into it, I was recently having a conversation with my students and I asked them what the biggest challenge is in entrepreneurship for them in general. What's the hardest thing? And they all said starting. And so that makes sense, right? Because it's really difficult for us to set goals for ourselves and try to reach those goals, because when we've been in school for all these years, when we've been doing jobs, all we know is plug in, be told what to do, and do it on time. That's what we do for our whole lives. That's what most people spend their entire lives doing. So yes, it's really hard for us to switch our mindset, switch the wiring in our brain to set goals for ourselves. But the truth that people don't realize is that entrepreneurs aren't really doing that. Like, yes, there is some initial inertia to overcome to set a goal and try to achieve it. And there are things happening behind the scenes that nobody knows about, sure. But at the end of the day, everything that entrepreneurs do is to keep the promises that they've made, usually to their customers, but it might be to investors, it might be to their employees, it might be to their mom, it might be to, you know what I mean? So accountability is a desire to keep your promises. And so that's what drives everybody forward, whether you're an employee, whether you're an entrepreneur. And so once you know that, you can start to see how to actually get started and how to find time. And so one thing I want to say about that is you have time. Like, I get it. You're busy. I was in college too. I was busy. I had tons of classes. Some of the classes were really hard. I was involved. I was in leadership positions, blah, 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 blah. But once the motivation was right, once the accountability was right, I was able to start spending time because I had to. So you have time. You can always make time. Your problem isn't that you don't have enough time. Your problem is that you don't have the right incentives. You don't have the right motivation. So again, to go back to it, accountability is a desire to keep your promises. It's what moves all of us forward. So with that said, it makes sense that the number one way to start actually spending time on it is to make a promise to somebody. And so how I learned this was I spent months completely stagnant thinking about Gator Venture Capital before I started it at the University of Florida. And so I had this idea. I knew that it could potentially work. I knew that people were interested, but I hadn't really said or promised anything about when it would launch, exactly what we would do, I guess, until I was having a conversation with a venture capitalist and basically brought up the idea of putting a team of students together for them to help them with deal sourcing, I think. And he said he was interested. And I was like, oh, great, except I didn't have anything at that point. We didn't even have a name, and we didn't have a website. We didn't have any students. We had absolutely nothing. And so now this guy had an expectation, and I was like, oh, crap. So in order to meet that expectation, in order to keep that promise, I need to get all these other things in order to deliver on that promise. And that's what accountability is. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, when they start out, think that they just need to like sit in their room and create something and then one day be like, hey, everybody, look what I've been working on. And sure, sometimes that can work. But I think having some sort of partner, having some sort of accountability. I also had a partner at the time who we were working together on it, so I had accountability there. But making a promise to somebody is what ultimately is going to, for lack of a better way to say it, light a fire under your ass and get you to start moving. Okay, so that's point number one. Point number two, so number one, make a promise. Number two, just start right now. Like I said, you have time. You just need to make time to make that initial promise, and the rest will come naturally. If you make that first promise, it will start this avalanche effect that's going to be really difficult to stop, but you have to start now, because the longer you wait, the harder it's going to be to start. I 100% understand what this is like. Honestly, I would use these videos as an example. I have thought about putting content like this out for probably about a year, and didn't do anything about it for a long time. And I know that when you're dealing with something like that, when you have a certain idea, something you want to do, and you haven't started doing it, you kind of get caught in this cycle of inaction where, okay, I want to do this, but I don't start. And then I look back and I'm like, well, I wanted to do it for the past month, but I didn't do it. So I wonder if I even could do it. I wonder if I even should. Like, maybe it's not worth it. I haven't done it yet, so maybe it's not meant to be, you know? You kind of get caught up in that mental cycle where the more time goes on, the more you're like, well, maybe I got to find something else to do and not do that thing. And so that was definitely the case with me and Gator Venture Capital. That was the case with me and these videos. That was the case with everybody I've ever met who wanted to start something ambitious and new that they haven't done before. So those are the two solutions. If you don't have time, or if you haven't found a way to spend any time on your own venture, hopefully you have an idea. If you don't, watch the first video, but haven't found a way to spend any time on your own venture, you need to do two things. You need to make a promise and you need to start now. I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you in the next one.